Well, in today's episode of the Post-Christian Podcast, I'm excited to have with me Maina Mwaura, a journalist and someone I met a long time ago. We have mutual friends in Goody Goodlow, Erwin McManus. Maina, how are you doing?
Doing good, man. It's good to be here with you, man.
Well,
I
it's
mean,
great to have you too. I'm excited to just learn a little bit more from you. You've been in the ministry for a long time
yeah,
and then made a transition into the world of journalism, and I love your writing. I just feel like
man.
you give a great perspective.
I appreciate it. I feel like it's so unfair, Eric, because you had another friend of mine on your podcast, Rasul.
Oh yeah, you know
Yeah,
Rasul. Oh, good.
it's kind of sad, man, that he was first. And so I'm just gonna tell you,
Just by a few days. I mean, we
I
just
said, oh man, it's
talked.
about a week. So I'm
Yeah.
making fun of him. I'm actually when we're done, I'm gonna take a picture and send it to him and say, hey, I got on too. So it's kind of
Well, we had such a really good conversation. His resources in pursuit of Jesus
oh, he's
and some of what
incredible.
he's doing is really, really good. And you posted something on your Facebook page the other day that just really got me thinking, and I wanted to get your perspective now, having been someone who served in the church, still a follower of Jesus, of
Yeah.
course, but from this new vantage point as a journalist, as you're talking with leaders, and you've interviewed some remarkable people in your short journalism career, but you said something, or you posted something about how children stop following God because their parents were so involved in the church, and they didn't have, they weren't involved at home, and they didn't see the transformation at
Yeah.
home. I feel like that's a great way to even describe maybe what's happening in our culture, that America, known as a Christian nation for so long, had people claiming to be followers of Jesus, but there was no transformation. They were so involved in the church, but there wasn't actual change in the heart and in the neighborhood. Describe what you're learning from some of these folks outside of the church in these interviews, and even what prompted you to post that, why that resonated so much.
Yeah, Eric, I'm very concerned just about where we're at just as a culture. I do think, it's one of those things where if we blink, it's going to go by faster than what we thought, man. And I do think we've got to catch on to where things are going because we have a legacy of our own kids, Eric,
Mhm.
who are going to still be here, man. And I don't know about you, but I can honestly say, man, it's one of those things when I look at my own kids, my own daughter, I go, man, 8 years just came so fast. And so it's one of those things, Eric, you know what I'm talking about, man,
Yeah.
where, you're going, man, where is culture going? So I want to put that, off to the side, Eric, to a certain degree. And one of the things that caught my attention was a guy named Tim Keller. He's an author, just great guy. The first time I actually sat down with Tim, man, he was clear with me how he thought we were already in a post Christian culture.
Yeah.
And Eric, at that time, I'd only been doing what I'm doing now for maybe 3 months, Eric. So it
Mm.
wasn't long.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember hearing him say that and just scratching my head a little bit, Eric, and going, well, could that be true? It was 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago now. And then he made another statement, which I thought, which every time I'm with him, I try to follow up with. He said what keeps him up at night is that we will not be able to connect the dots. Like, how do we help people connect those spiritual dots, Eric? In the
Yeah.
past, we've always had grandparents, our parents, our members who were Christ followers, and so it's easy for us to talk to somebody about Jesus just because we could point to somebody in their own life, Eric, per
Yeah.
se.
Yeah.
But what do you do when you can't point to someone in people's
Mm.
lives when
Mm.
they do not have a background at all about Christianity? What do you do then? And Eric, I would say it keeps me up at night more than what it should, probably, in the sense of that I am very concerned about it. And if I'm not careful, I'm also very passionate about it too, Eric. So I have
Yeah.
to be careful to
Yeah.
go, okay, watch your passion and your zeal, check your heart, as Proverbs tells us to guard our heart to make sure that we don't say stupid things, Eric. But I am
Yeah.
very, very convinced, man, that for those of us who are Christ followers in the here and now, that we need to keep that on our radar.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things I've been, saying when I'm speaking on a Sunday is that, when we're talking even about our own spiritual growth, the world needs us to take this seriously. Like, the world
Yes.
needs people who are more fully alive who
Yes, Eric.
fully connect with God, and so that that transformation can lead to interest on behalf of the world around us that's watching and seeing how we live our life. I mean, as you've interviewed folks, and if correct me if I'm wrong, you've interviewed like presidents, former presidents, and all sorts of really important and influential people. What are some of the things you're hearing them describe in terms of our culture?
You know what's cool, Eric, and thank you for you mentioning that. I mean, it's one of those things where it's gone by so fast in the last 4 years, almost 5 years. Like, sometimes I forget, man. And so I was talking to somebody today, and they brought up, man, how many presidents, how many vice presidents, and honestly, Eric, I forget most of the time. It's not like I'm trying to avoid the question here, but it is one of those things, man, where I have to stop sometimes and like zoom into what they're saying, man, to
Mhm.
kind of make sure that I'm not just writing it for the story, but that I'm listening to where they're at. And here's the good news, Eric. Influential people are saying to me over and over again that they want more of God too, man.
Mm, mm.
And so whether it is, former Vice President Al Gore, or whether it is, former President Carter, or whether it is Joe Scarborough, who I'm interviewing tomorrow, I am picking up this sense that
Mm.
people do want to know more about God. The hard thing, though, Eric, not to beat up on Christ followers, is that I think we are stuttering through the response, Eric.
Mm. Mm.
And that's what really kind of gets me just agitated, because I'm going, and people far from God want to know more about who we are, man.
Yeah.
They have never been more interested, I think, Eric, in wanting to
Mm.
know more about the gospel than ever before. But we have been more and more quieter on our response, Eric.
Wow.
We are drifting off on whether it's politics or whether it's the current event of the day. And I'm not saying that those things are not important. I think they
Yeah.
are, Eric. But I'm just saying, man, if people who are far from God are going, man, we want to know more, then let's talk about what we have.
Yeah. That's very good. I think that's super helpful. It's, you're going when you go to Chick-fil-A, you're going because you want a chicken sandwich. When you're going to church, it's probably you want to connect with God. Like, so
Yes,
let's help people do that, you know?
they really do, Eric. One of the things I love about you, man, I've noticed this for a long time, man, is that you have always kind of been in this culture mindset of, man, let's tell people about the gospel, and let's tell it well. It's one of the things I always appreciated about you, and I feel like there are some folks who may be going, well, I came to the party late, why not? So how do I get into it now? And you just got to start where you are.
Yeah.
But we cannot ignore the culture around us. And I think I came to the party fairly late, Eric, to
Mm.
be fair, where I
Yeah.
caught on, was like, wow, this is out here.
Well, and you talked about, Tim Keller and other places, like New York City and or the coast or here in Austin, when you have people whose connection to faith really ended in their family lineage with grandma. It's
Yeah,
like they were raised by parents who had already rejected what they may have grown up with, but now I mean, I've done had all sorts of conversations with folks here in Austin who grew up in Austin and have no experience within the
yeah,
building of a church. And one of the things that we try to do is just continue to share the message of Jesus, but in a way that helps the person who doesn't have any context understand.
wow,
And so it's really important that you don't have to change the message. Just make sure you're explaining the message. You
right.
know, yeah. Well, and you tell this story recently, this article I read about your interactions with James Brown, and he's obviously known for his work with the NFL on Sundays, and just such a great, you know,
Yeah,
well
man,
heralded
guy.
uh, journalist. But he also, as a Christ follower, opened the door for you to learn from him. Could you share that story, because I think it's a great example of discipleship in a whole different industry, but it's something we can learn from. Like, just saying yes and letting people follow us can make a big impact. Maybe share that story if you don't mind.
Man, Eric, I laugh because it's almost been 5 years now, man. And I
Mm.
look back at that time, And it was a terrible time in life, Eric. It was not a good season. I mean, I just got fired, and so
Mm.
nobody likes likes that, Eric, obviously. But I just gotten canned, and it was one of those kind of things where I kept going, okay, what could I do next? And Eric, I wanted to still do what I was doing, man.
Mm.
And here's where I think if we say yes, man, that we've got to, in some ways, we got to turn around from what we think our yes is into to what God's yes is, Eric, if that
Mm.
makes any real sense there.
Yeah.
And so I literally didn't know what to do, which is a good place to start, I
Mm.
think, for people. It's been the best place for me to start, Eric, in life
Mm.
when I've just gone, I don't know what to do next. Um, and so here I was. I'd always wanted to do journalism, Eric, but never really thought that I could, man. And by the way, I was 40. And so, Eric, you're thinking, I remember going, well, I've got to keep doing what I've always done
Mhm.
because that's what's always been the right thing to do. At least I thought at that time.
Right.
So here comes James Brown. And Eric, I forgot to tell this I did tell some part of the story, but I would just highlight this though. If you really want to know what God wants you to do next, I really do believe this. In saying yes, man, say yes to serving others. Because
Mm.
oftentimes I've found out, and people I've talked to have found out that that's where they will find out what next is, Eric. It's really
Mhm.
kind of interesting how that just happens. And so I
Mhm.
was serving at this nonprofit organization, and I was helping this pastor out. And Eric, it took us through Dallas of all places,
Mm.
man. And through that experience, the guy who I was helping for free, Eric at that time, just said, "Hey, what do you want?" And I can remember going, "I would love to meet James Brown." Now, here's what's weird about this, Eric. I didn't know a thing about football. I didn't play football, Eric. I had no sports background, which is even kind of funnier think about it. But I've been so just interested in his life, though.
Mm.
And that's what caught my attention more than anything else. And for 3 months, he allowed me to follow him around, Eric.
Wow.
And it was one of those things where I'll tell anyone in saying yes, I love this title, Eric, and saying yes, man, don't let your age or your ability stop you from saying yes, man.
Mm. That's great.
Because that time I'm 40, Eric. That's not a
Yeah.
good time to start a second career,
Right.
typically, Eric.
Yeah.
And I didn't
Yeah.
think this one could be it. And so when I can remember talking to an editor who said, "Well, give me some pitches, Eric." I remember going, "What are news pitches, man?" I didn't know what those were, Eric. Now looking back, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like a long story short, it was through those experiences, and I would also say, Eric, humbling myself, man,
Mm. Mhm.
because that was tough. And Eric, to make a longer story, hopefully not too long here, in the midst of all that, I don't know if you followed this story or not. Club Pulse, it was a
Mhm.
nightclub in Orlando.
Yeah.
Through a series of just exchanges, I got to know the club owner, man.
Mm.
And this is where I would say, Eric, the first aha moment of, okay, God, you may have something bigger and you want to put me in environments that are uncomfortable to me at that time anyway.
Mm.
And how do you want me to use what you've given me to share your light? And the funny thing is, I got a text message from the club owner today, so we still talk 5
Wow.
years later, Eric. We're
Wow.
still very much in. We're still very much friends, I would say. And she would end up saying, Eric, it was so bizarre. She said, and I was at my darkest time at that
Mm.
moment, Eric.
Mhm.
But she even said recently, "Thank you for being my light during that time."
Wow.
And to what I thought, Eric, was
Mm.
nothing to actually give, man.
That's amazing. Well, and to me, saying yes, this idea of, how do we reach people that, have a different worldview or see the world differently or don't have the same experiences? The Spirit of God is already at work over there.
It
So
is,
just
Eric.
saying yes, as a missions pastor in Georgia, you probably never would have thought you'd be in a conversation with the owner of a Pulse
I
night
did
bar,
not, Eric.
nightclub.
Eric,
Yeah.
I think by saying yes, the next thing we need to honestly do is ask questions.
Mm.
Like, I don't think we ask questions enough, Eric. And I think it's in
Mhm.
the asking questions that I really do believe that we get to share the gospel,
Mm.
man. I
That's
can't tell you
good.
how many times that's happened with people who are far from God, who I'm interviewing or just about daily life now. if you start out knowing that God's called you to be there, first of all, and He's already gone before us, as you've already said, Eric. And then I would say next is ask questions. You'd be amazed how
Mhm.
many people want to answer your questions, Eric.
Yeah.
But far too often, I think when as Christ followers, there's no way they don't want to answer my questions or talk to me. And I would say if you come across weird, there's a pretty good chance they probably don't want to.
Right.
Christ
Right.
followers are not, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
but
right.
but start by just asking questions, and I think I look in scripture this morning. I was reading John chapter 1, Eric, and Jesus calling his disciples. What I love about that chapter is that he's asking questions, man.
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
he is not like,
Mhm.
trying to just stand there. He's asking serious questions and then
Yeah.
responding back when they ask him questions,
Mhm.
which is what people will do if we'll start engaging them by asking them on their territory, where are they at and all of this stuff.
That's really good. That's very important. I feel like in my own experience, and I really kind of started doing this more in Los Angeles, is just learning to ask good questions. It's amazing as you get to hear someone's spiritual journey, they're very open to hearing yours. Like they just,
Yes.
you've just shown interest. And so being able to connect the dots where their story and your story intersects and how you found a relationship with God through Jesus and they could too, like that's the process of helping someone find faith.
It just is, Eric. I don't know about you. You've been this a lot longer than I have, but I don't think people far from God don't think Jesus is weird. Now they may think some Christ
Mm,
followers are, and
yeah.
for good reason, Eric.
Yeah.
I don't know what we've seen lately, anyway.
Yes, yes, for
But
sure.
I may think that's a little
Mhm.
off. But it's amazing. I mean, Jesus' character is still good, Eric.
Mm,
I mean, I'm always amazed whether it's following a riot like I did this past summer or wherever. Man, it's
mm,
amazing to me how
mm.
people still want to know more about him, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he still is which I think is pretty neat that people
Mm.
still are in awe with who was this man.
Yeah. That's right. 2000 years later. Well, I wonder if you could share just a little bit your thoughts on why racial reconciliation is so important for the church in order to reach this next generation. Derwin Gray out of North Carolina said that young people are not leaving the church, they're leaving the white church. That's his
Yeah,
quote. And just being able to be a part of a church that takes loving people, even those who look differently from a different background, seriously in a world where young people of all shades were marching, and protesting last summer after the tragedy with George Floyd and all that had happened throughout the spring with, Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. You just see a group of a generation that this is important to them, and
yeah.
yet sometimes the church is not seeming to make this a priority or seeing it as an expression of living out the gospel. If you would just share a little bit about what you've seen working and why you feel this might be more important than perhaps some churches realize.
Eric, man, I don't know where you've been in my house here this morning, but that's what I've been writing on. So, so forgive me for going on. Eric, this morning I woke up to an article, and I won't say which denomination it is. There's some great people who are in that denomination, but this certain denomination was giving money to reach Generation Z. They were saying, man, we want to invest more in Gen Z. And although I welcome them doing that, Eric, but I did think to myself, man, they are missing the point. It
Mm,
is not more money. It is honestly this certain denomination. When I looked at their track record on race, it's just not good, Eric.
yeah.
And they still have no one of color in their top, executive team
Mm,
there. And I thought to myself, how and people may not like this, Eric, and I gotta tell you, I know it's a hard pill to swallow at times, but how Generation Z sees that we are relevant, that we are credible, Eric,
mm,
is by race, man.
mm,
And so if they see something and if they go, that's all white or all black or all anything, Eric, they immediately go, is this traditional? Like, is this old school or
mm,
where are we going with this? Because they didn't grow up in a culture like that, Eric. This last 3 years ago, the kindergarten group that came through 3 years ago. My daughter was a part of that group. Eric, they were the most diverse kindergarten class in the country, man,
Wow.
that we had never even seen before. And
Mm.
I'm thinking to myself, okay, to this certain denomination was doing some good work, but I thought, man, they're missing it. It's not about more money, although that's helpful. It really is all about diversity. And Eric, there's a reason why. We look at Nike, we look at some of these other companies. There's a reason why that they have said we've got to turn on diversity, Eric, and
Mm.
I think they mean it. But I think there's a reason why they're doing that because they see the culture that's coming, Eric. And
Right.
the culture that's coming, how they know that we're relevant is by do they see everyone a part of that group? And
Yeah.
so to a church or to a denomination, I would say if you want to come across and if you want to be not come across, you're going to be relevant, then you're going to have to add people of color in everything that you do. And
Yeah.
you look at John chapter 1, Eric, what I love about that passage is that Jesus and Nathaniel are talking. And Nathaniel just basically goes, does anything good come from Nazareth? And Jesus basically says, and here comes an honest man. And I thought, man, I'm still struck by that one passage just because it's one of those things where Jesus doesn't go, get out of here because he's being offensive, but at the same time, he's asking a pretty pointed question. I think Generation Z is asking that same question of us as
Mm.
Christ followers. Like, does anything good come from who we are if we're not representing what the kingdom of God is going to look like, Eric?
Yeah.
The kingdom of God is going to be people of all races and all tribes, Eric. So why should we not be modeling that here?
Yeah. That's right. Well, John Burke, our pastor here at Gateway in Austin, pointed out that 500 times in the scriptures, Old and New Testament, you see this idea of all nations, and most, sacred texts from other world religions are more
Yep.
regional, but this book, the Hebrew scriptures and the New Testament, point towards a God who loves all people and all nations. And I think what you said is really important, just being intentional about including people of color in decision making. If you want to
Yes.
reach people who look differently, let them help you reach them. It reminds me, I think it's Shirley Chisholm that said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. you,
Yes.
you know
She does say that.
we should be the ones that making room at the table, and
Right.
even raising up people younger than us, because right around the corner, America is going to be a minority country. Austin just passed that, I think, a year or so ago. Of course, I was in Los Angeles for so many years, 13 years. Mine, I think I did one wedding with two white people. Every wedding was a combination of, a man and a woman from different
Eric, isn't that
backgrounds.
amazing though, man?
Yeah.
It's one
Yeah.
of those things, and Eric, you know this, 'cause you've been a part of this a lot longer than I have. I mean, LA was leading the way in this. But here in Atlanta, for example, man, I mean, we just passed that this year too,
Is
Eric.
that right? Yeah.
I mean, and so it's one of those things where we all knew that 2020 was coming in a lot of different ways. We won't get into that, Eric, but
Yeah.
we knew that was coming, man.
Yeah.
When it came to racial turnover, I
Yeah.
just I just think oftentimes, and not you, Eric, but we're doing a great job talking about it. But we're doing a lousy job applying it, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think talk is great. I mean, a lot of things happen because people talk it out, but man, we've got to move on it, man.
Yeah. One thing that I've seen work really well in working with different churches is who want to be diverse. I mean, they want to, but they don't necessarily even know how. I love
Yeah.
what you said earlier about, asking good questions. That's certainly a good start. But there's also something that I've seen some churches do, and I'm sure you're familiar with the Rooney Rule, since you and James Brown are friends. Rooney Rule is the NFL rule for
Yes.
interviewing a minority before you can hire your head coach. And so some of these churches I've talked to, just this idea of a person of color having the opportunity to at least video interview first before you just
Right.
offhandedly decide no. Because what's interesting is if you think in terms of culture, if someone comes from a different church culture, maybe they've been in an Asian American church or an African American church or a Hispanic church, they may not answer questions on a resume, fill out the resume with this answering in the same way. Like there's some
Yeah.
implicit bias that we might actually miss. And I've seen that even here at my own church in Austin, some amazing candidates that if you were to read the resume, you wouldn't have necessarily thought they'd be a good fit. And now they're on staff,
Right.
thriving, starting campuses with us. Like it's been really beautiful, just creating that space to
Mm.
listen, and
Man,
create
Eric,
opportunity.
it's beautiful though, isn't it, man? I don't know if you've been following the Muppet controversy that's been going on, Jim Henson's Muppets. It's been kind of
Uh-oh.
interesting
Uh-oh.
because they're going back and they're putting those up online for people to watch. And you know what, Eric? It's amazing to me as I go back and look at those. I can remember as a kid watching those, and to be fair, Eric, finding it to be, man, nothing's wrong with this. It was okay because that's what was acceptable at that time, Eric.
Right.
Now I look at it and I go, oh, wow, like, how did I miss that? I
Yeah.
mean, Eric,
Yeah. Yeah.
as I look at it in today's light,
Yeah.
and I do think we've got to stop and go, especially if you're Generation X and up, is stop and go, okay, are there any biases in my own heart?
Sure. Yeah.
Eric, the truth of the matter is, at times, there have been.
Right.
But when
Yeah.
you have friends of all different shades and races, what I love about that though, Eric, is that people are able to hold you accountable and go, hey, you may have noticed this, but I did though.
Hmm.
And I would tell anyone if you want to do multi-ethnic work, man, if you don't want to be held accountable by people of different shades and races, then you probably don't want to do that work then.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those deals where, Eric, the more friends I have of different races and cultures, the more messier it gets, Eric.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't
Yeah.
get easier. I
Yeah.
like to say it
Yeah.
does, but it gets
Yeah.
messier. But at the same time, the more the celebrations come, Eric,
That's right.
too.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and I think part of what's beautiful, and you're really hitting on this, it may be messier, but it's because there's a freedom to talk, now,
Yes.
in a way that our parents' generation and even us growing up, there was almost like we were all in the same room, but we weren't necessarily in the same group. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like but this
Right.
next generation, that is their world. They can't see a world that the one we grew up in. They don't see
They
it.
just can't, Eric. I was in my daughter's classroom last year, and it was funny to me because I looked across this room and I thought everyone's here. And when she was in kindergarten, there was this kid who was in her class, um, Hindu background, and she was like, "Man, he comes with the best food, Daddy." And I can remember going, like, okay, it's like you're eating this, I didn't know Eric at the time, man.
Yeah.
And she was
Yeah.
explaining what she was eating. So I remember having to go to that kid's parent and ask, "Man, my daughter loves whatever your kid is bringing. Can you tell me what that is?" Because I never had it before, Eric, or even heard of it
That's
before at the
awesome.
time. But I thought to myself, here's this generation, Z, and man, Eric, my fear, I should say fear, but concern, legitimate concern, is that I am deeply concerned that today's church will not be ready for my daughter and her friends.
Mm, mm,
Um, and it does keep me up at night at times. It's probably why I'm doing what I'm doing today
mm.
is to, man, shine a light in places that we never thought that there could be one, Eric.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Uh, but I think we've got to do more of that, though,
That's
man.
right. That's good. Yeah, the church absolutely should be on the front lines of
Yes.
reconciling the world, to Jesus, but also to each other. Well, Mina, it's really great to have you. Thank you
It's
for
good to be
taking
here. It
some
went by so
time.
fast, man. It's
Uh,
like, man, this is, it was awesome, Eric.
Well,